We're dealing with the question of challenges to Israel and the United States, and they seem to multiply and emerge constantly. Our guest tonight is the 9th ambassador of Israel to the United States who has spoken before this council. And over the years, starting in 1980, we've dealt with a wide variety of questions, many of which remain on the table this evening. Israel, which has unique support in the United States and lives in a very tough neighborhood, raises a variety of questions for all of us, certainly for Israel, but for the United States as well. Our guest this evening has been the ambassador of Israel to the United States since 2006. His early education, Bachelor of Arts degree, Hebrew University of Jerusalem, served as a lieutenant in the Israeli Defense Forces. He has been an advisor to both the Minister of Defense and the Minister of Foreign Affairs in government work. He's helped in the development of both foreign and defense policies. He was active in the peace process leading up to the Madrid conference, in the negotiations following that, representing the Ministry of Defense, and headed up an interagency team on questions of arms control. A very interesting service to his country. The second part of his public service sounds a little different, but it's profoundly in the service of the State of Israel. He served as the treasurer of both the Jewish Agency of Israel and the World Zionist Organization, and then as chairman of both of those organizations from 1999 to 2006. Of the many things which he did while there, one that really catches one's attention is the focus upon the youth and the future of the people of Israel. A program was established to bring 20,000 young Jews from the diaspora to Israel for a year's experience. Every year a turnover of a large number of that youth group. And there was also a Jewish People Policy Planning Institute established. So his career, at least when you look at it on paper, has two very interesting paths, both of which are obviously clearly directly oriented toward the good of the State of Israel. As I mentioned, he's the 9th ambassador from Israel to speak to us. We're absolutely delighted. It's my great pleasure to present Sallai Meridor.
Good evening. Thank you for the very kind introduction. Thank you, Terry, my very dear friend. Thank you, Lockheed Martin. Thank you, the anonymous contributor of the wine I haven't drunk. I hope it'll make some sense. And thank you all for coming and joining my wife and myself here. We weren't sure how many people will be here, but it is really amazing, and thank you really for taking the time and listening and engaging with regard to a perspective of the challenges facing America and Israel in the coming few years, maybe a decade, maybe more. Now I have to be very careful because who am I to make predictions? And I've been yesterday in New York in a special evening honoring Bill Gates by the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, giving him the first inaugural Einstein Award. And everybody was talking about relativity. And I figure that everything is relative. And who knows whether what I'm saying today will be considered the truth of tomorrow. And I realize that everything depends on where you stand, who you serve, how you see things, when you say them, and things change in terms of their perspectives. Like today, 19 years ago, the headlines in many papers after a meeting between Gorbachev and President Bush, the two leaders, where the Cold War is over. Will they define or state this exactly the same 19 years ago? Maybe, maybe not. 79 years ago, to date, President Hoover made a statement which is totally unrelated to today's reality. He said that the worst effects of the recent stock market crash are behind the nation, and the American people have regained faith in its economy, only to go back just a year after to ask for a stimulus package of $150 million to encourage the economy. So it's all about when you say things, how you say things. One thing I promise you, this was 107 years ago, where President Teddy Roosevelt made a 20,000-word speech. I promise not to make a longer one today. Now to our business. Yesterday we buried in Israel the victims of the Mumbai terrorist attack, which unfortunately serves as a reminder to us all of the nature of the threats and challenges that Israel, the United States, many democracies, many peace-loving countries are facing, and unfortunately, I'm afraid, going to face in the near future, in terms of terror, in terms of nuclear proliferation, in terms of the most dangerous nightmare that we may be awaiting us, which is the marriage between the two, between terror and nuclear. So I would like to share with you some thoughts today on three challenges that I believe we are facing together, the US and Israel. The terror threat, the nuclear threat, and the challenge to expand the circle of peace and achieve peace in the Middle East. Let us start with terror. We are facing, and again the we is America and Israel and beyond, a wave of very dangerous terror coming at us, unfortunately, from radical Islamist extremism. We've seen it and do see it in Israel. Just to give you proportions, between the year 2000 and 2004, we were the victims of suicide bombing, relatively new phenomena in terror, where 1,000 Israelis were killed, largely in the center and the centers and towns of Israel. And in the last 4 years, we've been victims to some 4,000 rockets that were launched at civilian population in Israel. Israel is currently covered by some 40,000 rockets and missiles in the hands of terrorists, guided, trained, funded by Iran from the north and the south. And this threat is really impacting potentially on everybody in what we refer to as the civilized world. It is largely perpetrated by radical Muslims. Again, not all Muslims are terrorists, and I have to repeat that. This is a minority, but extremely dangerous. Their reach and aspirations are global. They have made terror, and are working to make it even more so, into a weapon of mass destruction. They are there to kill. They are using proxies, non-state actors, and failing states in order to harbor terror attacks. And they've developed the notion of homicide or suicide attacks, where it is not that they are ready to give their life for a cause, they are striving to kill as many people as possible as part of accomplishing their goal. And this is why in the last attack in Mumbai, to the best of our knowledge, there was hardly any attempt to reach something, a goal, to negotiate something. It was about killing as many people as they may kill. Now, this is a very, very difficult challenge, because the attack can come from many, many places. The attackers are very difficult to identify. Many of them are indeterrable because they live within the framework of an ideology which says that they're only gaining the better life if they face Allah after having killed as many people as one can. So what can you deter a person who is, sorry for the expression, dying to die? How can you deter him or her? And this creates a major challenge to us all. And there isn't, unfortunately, a silver bullet of how you deal with this challenge. It is a combination, which we are experiencing daily, of different steps. First of all, one has to enhance his defense, protection of population. Like if you look at Israel, this is extremely different from everything we've been used to. Israel's security doctrine has never been on defense. We hardly had an element of defense in our security doctrine. But now we are building a fence to protect ourselves from suicide bombers. At times we have guards at the entrance of every coffee shop. We are building a multi-layer anti-rocket system, trying to develop the most sophisticated systems, extremely costly, because, as I said, we are covered by 40,000 rockets that by a signal from Iran can be launched. So it's about improving the defense as one element. Second, because defense is very partial, look at Mumbai, look at every other terror attack or event. It's about hitting the terrorists before they get to you. It's being able to get to them before they reach you. It necessitates investment in intelligence cooperation, because none of us covers all the places where terrorists can come from. And it's cooperating operationally in ways that countries have not been used to cooperate. It's about deterring not the indeterrable, but countries that either harbor terrorists or turn a blind eye to terrorist activities. They are deterrable, the countries, and they should know that there is a price to acquiescing with terror. It is about finding a way to deal with failed states. Major, major, major challenge. We see it in Lebanon, where Hezbollah is kind of a state within a state, but the real power is Hezbollah, is not the Lebanese government, acting under the cover of a failed state. Some people refer similarly to Pakistan today. And it is about not acquiescing anymore with education to hatred, which is spread throughout the Muslim world. And if this doesn't stop, all the rest will not be enough, because the next generation of murderers is growing up. And it's about encouraging authentic Muslim moderate voices to participate in an internal debate in the Muslim world for the values that we are all share, or that we all share, and many of them in the Muslim world do share, but keep silent. So it's many, many elements that need to take place together with a lot of cooperation in order to be able to manage, I'm not saying solve, a major threat, a wave that is coming at us, has already hit us in some areas, but unfortunately this wave has hardly reached its peak and is far from being over. Now the nightmare is when this wave is going to meet nuclear capabilities. And some of those terrorist organizations are already looking for access to some aspects of nuclear capacity. And that brings me to the second shared challenge to America and Israel and friends of America and Israel, which is preventing nuclear weapons from falling or being in the hands of rogue regimes, non-state actors, terrorist organizations. And here the key player is Iran. This regime that is radical, with ambitions of hegemonizing the Middle East and changing world order. The largest exporter of terror worldwide, certainly in the Middle East, but we've met them in other places as well, like in Argentina twice. This regime is on the march to have nuclear military capacity. And if they get it, or if they continue to get closer to it with the indirect ramifications, they could get all of us closer to this nightmare I have tried to articulate. Where are they? In defiance of now 4 Security Council resolutions, they continue to spin the centrifuges. They continue to enrich uranium. By the last report of the International Agency for Atomic Energy, they have accumulated already 630 kilos of low enriched uranium. It appears that they produce 2.5 kilos every day, which could bring them, or most likely will bring them sometime in 2009, to have enough low-enriched uranium to have a bomb. Now, this is not yet a bomb. They have to go from low-enriched uranium to high-enriched uranium, and this may take them a year or two, depending on how they do that. They may even decide to stay for a while on this threshold of being months from a bomb upon their choice. But what will be the ramification for the Middle East and the world? You'll see, most probably, rise of extremism in the region, decline in hopes and chances for accommodation and peace, growing Iranian hegemony, and other countries of the Middle East acting in two directions, potentially. Some either or, some one and the other, cutting deals with Iran, and either alternatively or at the same time looking for their own nuclear options. And there could be a cascade of instability and potentially nuclear race in this region. Currently, 13 countries in the region, all of a sudden this year, are looking for what they refer to as civil nuclear energy. Some of them, the richest oil countries in the world. Their need for atomic civil energy is at least not imminent. And they're into this business all of a sudden. Potentially, probably, because of their worry of what may happen as Iran gets closer and closer to this point. And if they get to the point, and if others are following, who knows how time it will take before in this area where there is so much extremism and so much terrorism, how much will it take until a terrorist organization or a non-state actor gets its hand over this capacity? So what can be done? Some people may suggest nothing. Not only this is not an answer because the meaning for the world is devastating, but it's not a right answer, it's not a correct answer. If the world wants to act, if the world wants to read the writing on the wall before it's too late, there is still time to act. And the experience of 2003, where Iran agreed when they saw at that time America in Afghanistan, America still perceived to be very successful in Iraq. They signed an agreement then to suspend activities, which they kept for 2 years, which tells you that they are sensitive to their situation and that they have vulnerabilities, and we know that their economy is extremely vulnerable. But it will take a combination. If to have a chance, I'm not certain, but to have a chance, it will take a combination of much, much, much more serious economic pressure, together with messages to the Iranian people. This is not against the Iranian people, but against a certain policy of the regime, and keeping the other option ready on the table, that the Iranians know that the world is serious, that we are not going to acquiesce with the consequences of their continued pursuit of weapons of mass destruction. The window is not closed, but it's closing. And the time to act is not tomorrow, but now. Now let me move from what I call the Oy vey department of my talk to the more wowie part of it. And this has to do with the third challenge that America and Israel share, both in terms of values and in terms of interests. And this is trying to expand the circle of peace in the Middle East. And again, going back to my beginning, take perspective. When Israel was reborn 60 years ago, it was attacked by 7 Arab countries, which tried to abort Israel before coming into being. Leading in those attacks were 2 countries that today have peace relations with Israel, both Egypt and Jordan. We had a terrible war in 67 and then another war in 73. 67, we felt under existential threat. 73, we lost 3,000 soldiers in the battlefield in less than 3 weeks. We have today peace with Egypt, we have today peace with Jordan. And even though it is extremely difficult because of this wave of extremism in the region, we are not sparing an effort to try and bring peace between us and the Syrians and between us and the Palestinians. We have tried to engage with the Syrians for the last year, and we are engaging with them. After a long debate within Israel, still indirectly because they insist on the indirect, in trying to find out whether the Syrians are ready to really change position a la Sadat in the mid-70s, of moving from the Iranian camp to a camp that is moderate, that is peace-seeking, that is looking for building a prosperous future for their children, for our children. We are not sure what's their direction. But not being sure that the direction is negative, we owe it to our children not to give up on the effort to try and encourage them to make a choice for peace. This is why we have decided to engage. The same is the case, even more so with the Palestinians. We could have every reason or excuse not to engage. We've been betrayed, we've been frustrated, but this is not a recipe for policy, nor it is responsibility for our children. So after the Intifada, even though Hamas won the elections, even though after Gaza and the West Bank have basically been split between Fatah and Hamas, we are engaging in a 2-track process with the Palestinians. One track is bottom-up, trying to create conditions conducive to Palestinian statehood, with taking risks on the part of Israel, including some security measures that increase the risks to Israelis, trying to support growth of the Palestinian economy. And things are moving forward over the last few months in impressive way, with the Palestinians operating partially in Nablus and in Jenin, and now in Hebron, and potentially, hopefully, sooner than later in Bethlehem, with growth in the year 2008 for the Palestinian economy that we've not witnessed for a long while. So, using Churchill, it's not the end, it's not the beginning of the end. I'd even say it's not even the end of the beginning, but it's the beginning. And at the same time, there is the top-down channel, which is very serious political negotiations on core issues between us and them. The most sensitive issues. Now we know how painful the compromise would be. For both sides, by the way. We are not blind to the difficult compromises they have to make. Israel will have to give up on territories, if you want, promised to the Jewish people in the Bible forever. We'll have to tell our children, like we read every Sabbath from the Torah, and if you were joining us last Shabbat or this Shabbat, you will read about the places where we will have to tell our children, we are the generation that decided that we are giving up on those territories forever. It's not an easy decision, but we'll have to make it. We'll have to tell our people, Jews worldwide and Israelis, you will be able to live only in the parts of the land of Israel that are the state of Israel, and will not be able to live or return to parts of the land of Israel that are going to be the Palestinian state. We will probably have to uproot tens of thousands of Israelis who live in those territories. It's a nightmare that we'll have to go through, with major risks to our society. And we will have to do it. They will have to make equal compromises. They will have to tell their people that they are going to accomplish their dream of statehood only in part of the land, not in all of the land. That their people will be able to return only to that part of the land that would be the state of Palestine, not to the part of the land that will be the state of Israel. They will have to respect Israel's security needs. The special connection between the Jewish people and the city of Jerusalem. These are going to be very difficult compromises for both sides. The Israeli people is ready to make them. Peace for us is a value, and peace for us is a strategic choice. And we hope that we'll have a Palestinian partner who is ready to walk this path together with us, to have this historic compromise for a two-state solution, a Jewish state and a Palestinian state living in peace, security, and dignity, side by side for their children and for our children. Before I take all your question time, which is a known trick of diplomats to make sure that they are not embarrassed with difficult questions, let me close with some reflections about Israel, a place that you, I hope, won't blame me that I dearly love. What I was telling you is the story of Israel. Prime Minister Sharon was articulating that by saying, we have two hands. We were forced to always have to hold a gun in one hand to protect ourselves. But we never allowed ourselves not to use the other hand to stretch for peace and to continue to build our country. And all of you who visited Israel, I want to say I'm sure, feel the same in terms of what accomplishments, under what conditions Israel has accomplished. Growing the economy times 10 in 60 years. The population, sorry, growing the economy 60 times in 60 years. Innovation in the areas of high tech that are unbelievable. Like we are, in terms of startups, Israel is second only to the United States, not per capita. Every computer you open, you are likely to find some Israeli innovation. Almost every cellular, every digital camera. So many of the internet systems are Israeli programmed. I've been yesterday honoring Bill Gates with Hebrew U. Microsoft just bought an Israeli startup. To my table was sitting Mr. Dell. He has just been to Israel, exploring for options. I've visited Intel in California. Some 50% of their sales are based on Israeli development. Some 50% of Intel international sales. When Warren Buffett decided to buy first company out of the United States, it was Yizkar in Israel. Go to biotech, if it is medicine for MS, or if it is kind of exoskeleton for people who are paralyzed, who can, for the first time in their life, walk. And this is by a nation that doesn't have oil and doesn't have gas. And Golda was the name of a prime minister, not anything to do with gold. And trying to really take a weakness or a vulnerability and making it into an asset. Take the shortage of water with drip irrigation, with using recycled water. Like most of our agriculture today is based on recycled water. Desalination, and on, and which makes us at least so proud of, not ourselves, but of the promise to the world, not to Israel, is the contribution to the world. Because these dripping systems are now in different places in Africa. And if we have a system of mother and child care, which is extremely impressive, it is now in Africa and in Asia. And again, back to the Hebrew University yesterday, I'm told the Hebrew University, you will not believe this story, and maybe you're right not to believe it, because it sounds like Texans trying to sell ice to Alaska. But they say in Hebrew University, and I'm a graduate of Hebrew U, so I have to believe them, that they're developing now a type of rice with different vitamins, and soon Israel will export rice know-how to no other place than China. So all I'm saying is perspective. We, America and Israel, major challenges. And there are very significant, unpleasant, worrying clouds. But when we look at what we have achieved, when we look at what we are currently doing, I think that we can justifiably be hopeful that we will be able to overcome the difficulties and meet the challenges. Thank you very much.
That was fun, wasn't it? Thank you very much. A marvelous statement of challenges and a very positive statement about meeting the last challenge and a celebratory encouragement. Question, please. Would you comment about what Israel may be doing about biological threats? And in fact, do you equate those with the degree of the nuclear threat?
Well, obviously, all types of weapons of mass destruction should be a source of worry. I mentioned before that the terrorists, in actions like in September 11, make of a conventional weaponry a weapon of mass destruction. So we should really look out of the box in terms of thinking about what they can do in terms of creating mass destruction, even if they are not using what is traditionally thought of as weapon of mass destruction. But within those terrible categories of traditional and non-traditional weapons of mass destruction, obviously the biological is very worrying. Steps are being taken, but if you have to compare between the danger in the different types, the conventional wisdom, which sometimes is proven to be wrong by reality, but the current conventional wisdom is that the threat from a nuclear device in the hands of somebody who is ready to use it to kill and destroy, and this could be a terror organization or a proxy organization. If they have a device, they put it on a boat or a ship, it goes to, God forbid, you pick the target, any harbor could be the target, or by a regime like the Iranian regime. If they get to the point that they, if you want, about to go under, if they are in a position of similar to Hitler in the bunker, and it's not anymore about saving the revolution or not saving the revolution, it's how you face Allah. Are you going to face Allah after having used the bomb or neglecting your capacity to use the bomb? I don't know what choice they might do or might make. So biological is, you know, I could destroy the evening altogether. And it won't be justice neither to the viewer nor to the people. So biological is a very serious threat, but I think that the nuclear is that much more devastating.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Regarding the attack in Mumbai last week, it was an attack from the sea. In fact, some would say it was the first amphibious landing since the U.S. Marines landed in Incheon in the Korean War. And some would also say that it took place or it happened from the sea because we've made airports and our land borders relatively secure. Has Israel considered the possibility of a terrorist attack from the sea, and is Israel prepared to protect itself, defend itself against such an attack?
Well, first of all, the short answer is yes. We have been attacked from the sea, by the way, in the past. Obviously, this is a vulnerability, and we are certainly taking defensive measures in order to try and be prepared. But as I said before, defensive measures are limited. They are extremely, extremely expensive, sometimes prohibiting. Like, you cannot even start to imagine when you have 40,000 rockets targeted at you, and each of them is so inexpensive to produce because you don't need any sophistication for terror. You don't have to hit a target that is very accurate. You target Tel Aviv, you target Haifa, you target Jerusalem, you target Beersheba, you target largely places where you want to kill people, to kill innocent people. That's your target. So it's so inexpensive to produce masses of rockets, and it's so expensive to develop a system that would be able to intercept those rockets, because some of them are 3 miles range, 6-mile range, 15 miles range. Their flying time is seconds. You have to be able to identify them, to follow them, to hit them before they hit you. So that's just one example. Fences are extremely expensive. Like to build defense, like in Israel, every house has to have a secure room. It increases the cost of housing in Israel significantly, because this room is much more expensive than another room. So there is a limit, technological limit and financial limit to defense. In addition to the inherent lack of intelligence. So it's not hermetic. At the end of the day, you'll have infiltration of terror. And as much as you think you're smart, and startups and everything, there are smart people on the other side too. And if you fail to realize that, you'll be surprised. So defense is not enough. You have to find them where they are. You have to destroy their infrastructure. You have to terribly deter people who may support them and think that you don't see that. There should be zero patience to countries that support terror or acquiesce with terror, countries that proliferate nuclear technology. Because if there is no penalty, very severe penalty, to those steps or those actions or negligence in those areas, it will be very difficult to provide for sufficient security for our children, nothing less.
Is there a solution for Jerusalem?
I tell you what I won't do and what I do. I don't think this is going to be helpful if an Israeli official will deal with this sensitive issue like the other sensitive issues out of the rooms where we are negotiating. And this is obviously one of the most sensitive issues on the table. I hope that our interlocutors understand how deep is the connection between the Jewish people and the city of Jerusalem. And I'm not making here now any political statement, and I'm not drawing any lines for potential compromise. But I think part of the ability to get into an agreement is trying to understand how the other side feels. And if I were them, I would open the Bible and look how many times Jerusalem is mentioned in different names. I would open the Jewish prayer book and see how many times a day a Jew mentions Jerusalem. I would meet with a Jewish family and ask them how Jerusalem plays in their own lives. When a child is born, we are saying, if I forget thee, Jerusalem. When we get married, before we conclude this agreement between the couple, we are saying, if we forget thee, Jerusalem. And when, God forbid, somebody dies, what we usually tell to comfort is, may you find comfort amongst the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. So I hope they understand that Jerusalem is our heart, and the rest we leave for the negotiation room.
Would you comment upon the tactic of cutting off food or power, both in terms of its humane aspects and in terms of its efficiency?
Let me start with the facts as I understand them, and then try to give you the context as I see it. First of all, the facts. The facts, to the best of my understanding, is that we are not cutting Gaza from power. Israel, being attacked from Gaza, continues to supply electricity to Gaza. Some 70% of Gaza electricity is coming straight from Israel. We have not, and some 10% I think comes from Egypt. None of this has been stopped. Israel was enabling the provision of humanitarian assistance to Gazans, even though we are attacked from Gaza, for a very long period of time. And if the Gazans were not attacking Israel, and were not attacking the crossings, only over the last 2 weeks, 4 times the crossings themselves were attacked by the terrorists from Gaza. It would have been easier to open the crossings. And by the way, under those attacks, we are still allowing humanitarian passage for people to hospitals and for international crews to come in and out in order to prevent a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. These are the facts, or at least in addition to what your impression was to what your impression was. But now let me try to give you the context. 2005, Israel left Gaza. We didn't leave a soldier, nor have we left a civilian in Gaza. It was one of the most painful moments in Israel's history. We took 8,000 Jews out of their homes, work, lives, dreams, and we left Gaza for the Gazans. We left for them greenhouses, which were, if not the best, of the best in the world. All export geared to Europe, to America, for them to have a beginning of statehood. They didn't want to sign an agreement. They had an opportunity, were given an opportunity to start building something. No Israeli interrupting. Not only that they burnt the greenhouses, not only that they desecrated the synagogues that were left there, but they are using the same places to launch rocket attacks against Israel. They voted in a terrorist government and continuously launching rockets at Israel. We are talking about some 2,000 or 2,500, I think, rockets. Just think about the number. Today, okay, you have cities in Israel, Ashkelon, Sderot, villages, communities that are under constant barrage of rockets. Sometimes 3 a day, sometimes 10 a day, sometimes 30 a day. And for them not, forget about, we will do everything we can to avoid humanitarian crisis. But for them, it will take the simplest thing, to stop killing. It's not about avoiding humanitarian crisis. We want them to flourish. Or do we want to have neighbors that are suffering? That makes any sense for Israel? We would prefer that they build something that they can take pride in, that they take care of their own future, that they, if you want, have something to lose. It will take them minutes to change their situation if they were just stopping this terror attack, stopping smuggling weapons from Iran, stopping smuggling terrorists into Gaza, stopping stockpiling thousands of rockets aimed at Israeli towns, working in laboratories to extend the range to cover hundreds of thousands of Israelis. So I understand that there are difficulties in Gaza. I don't think people are having the best of life there. I understand that not every Gazan is responsible, even though they voted in free elections, a terrorist government. But still, there are those who may have not voted for it, and definitely children did not vote for it. And we want to do everything to make it easier for them. But for God's sake, the responsibility is theirs. They are running the place. They are using it as a terror base. And you don't even see thousands of Gazans going to the streets to demonstrate against this terror attack. That you could argue there is a silent minority or majority that is opposing that. You don't see that. So on the one hand, we are trying to ease the situation to the extent we can in the context of being under attack, in the context of our children not being able to sleep at night. And at the same time, when it comes to responsibility, I think we should not make a mistake by placing the responsibility where it is. It is with the terrorists, not with those who defend themselves against terror.
It's very tempting to ignore my watch, and I have to apologize to a large number of you who still have questions. But I'm not going to recognize you, and instead, thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for sharing your wisdom.
Thank you.